Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think I love this conversation. And like we have it often. And it's such a poignant conversation. Just again, just talking about the generations. And it doesn't matter if we're in real estate or mortgage and management, leadership, sales. I mean, the generations in general is such a factor in our society, our lives, and it's fascinating. And we're going to get into talking about the generations and what's going on in home ownership and that sort of thing. But maybe let's just talk about the generations itself. So what generation are you from, Kristin?
I am millennials, and it was really funny. I started my career in mortgage or started working in this industry when everyone was just starting to talk about millennials. And I remember doing so many presentations where people would just like hate on millennials and just be like, I literally had one person in a presentation be like, millennials are monsters. I will never forget it because I was like laughing so hard, but it was just a constant thing. And now we've kind of grown out of it. We've moved on to a new generation to hate on. So
That's so true. Well, I mean, like the millennials, right? It's not as cool to keep it real anymore. Like we're married, kids, we got to pay taxes, we got jobs, I mean, I think, well, so in honor of you being a millennial, and like I was telling you ahead of time, one of my favorite Halloween costumes, like 10 years ago, is I dressed up as a millennial. So I'm going to go ahead and put on one of my accoutrement to that costume, which is my beanie. But you got to kind of pull it back just a little bit, go kind of high forehead, which I have all foreheads, so it's easy for me to do. But
for
so
you.
I'm gonna represent my younger generation friends with my beanie on. So is that okay?
Welcome.
I'm getting, and so anyway, for everyone who's on here, put in the chat. I'd love to see like what are our generations in here. We got Gen Zs, Xers, Millennials, Boomers. I'm a Gen Xer myself. We're like the middle child of the generations, right? Like we're like, in fact, this is me being an Xer. We're the Jan Brady's. Does anyone even know who Jan Brady is?
Oh, Jan Brady. Yes.
Jan of the Brady
Yes.
bunch, right? Like that's the middle child, right? Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, good. We got a Gen X on there.
That's
Ryan, what's up, brother? I
the same
appreciate some Gen X representation here. So, all right. So it's funny, right? We got the millennials who are kind of merging now a little bit more into the Xers. The Xers are merging more into kind of like what the boomers are. And now we've got this entrance of the Gen Zers.
Mhm.
Well, about what age group is that? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's a well, actually I'm gonna say it wrong. I think it's like around 25 and under at this point,
Okay.
26 maybe to 14. Do you know what the exact age
I'd have to maybe Sony, can you chat GPT that real quick and put a
or
date in there?
Google says it's under 27, like with 12
27.
to
Yeah.
27.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, I entered the mortgage business. I think I was about 27, maybe. Yeah. I think I was about 27 years old. Right. And so we're starting to see this entrance of Gen Zs into the business. And it's great. But and look, we're not even going to talk about home ownership yet. Let's just talk about leadership, management. How do we navigate into a generation that looks at society, our economy differently than what we did?
Yeah, I mean, you think about the fact that we millennials and Xers and above, like we learned the internet, like there was a
Mm,
time when we weren't like I think Ryan was starting to say something about this of like having analog growing up. Like we still had that. Gen Z never had that. They've been digital from the beginning, and that just creates a totally different
yeah.
mentality and experience growing up in that kind of world.
Yeah. And actually made me think. So when I was in college, I remember the first 2 years of college, I went to the library when I had to do research for a paper or whatever.
Yeah, me
The
too.
the second 2 years of college, I tried this new thing called the internet. And I remember that sort of delineation, right? But of course,
Yeah.
it took too long because it was all dial up. So I just went back to the library. But so I think that's really fascinating. And the other thing is, with the Gen Zs and the millennials growing up on the internet, on social media, it's really ignited desire, need, and wiring of immediate gratification. I need immediate gratification, right? I need the sugar at all times. And I think that certainly impacts what we've seen certainly in the workplace too, because we had the great resignations during COVID and whatnot. And I feel like in the younger generations, sometimes it's easier to. I don't mean any by the way, fine print. I don't mean any offense to anybody on here. So can I just preemptive apologies to anybody. But there seems to be a willingness to walk away from something, perhaps more so than maybe the older generations. And I'm not even saying right, wrong, or indifferent here,
Yeah.
but I try to understand why, right? And then how do we help? How do we service that? Do you have any thoughts on that, or am I just going off?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting when, again, when I was first looking at like researching millennials and things like that, that was at the beginning of,
Yeah.
or I feel like the beginning of the instant gratification world, but I'm sure every generation before has like had their own version of what instant gratification looks like, but it is different now. I mean, I used to talk about the fact that, now we order something and it arrives in 2 days. And like, that was like, yeah, isn't that insane? And now it's like, of course, like if
Yeah.
it, that's just a given in this world. And there's just so much more around, yeah, what the internet is, what AI does, and our expectations around instantly accessing information that I think is a certain expectation for experience, but also something that you and I've talked about before is that there's also like a level of distrust, around
Mm.
what that information is going to provide them. Like they have an expectation for instant access, but also they're not necessarily going to trust that information. They would wait to be able to talk to someone that they would trust. I mean, I think there's like an interesting divide happening, especially with Gen Z, because they've had this instant access to information that becomes almost too much.
That's really, really insightful. Really insightful. And I think about this. So I mentor a few people that are in that Gen Z kind of mid to late 20s. And I will say this: they are so much more advanced than I ever was at that age in their knowledge, their awareness. They have great heads on their shoulders. I wasn't at all that way. There's intuition, sure, and that access to knowledge at such a younger age, that consumption, that awareness, and then how they've interpreted that. I mean, honestly, they are way more advanced at that age than I was. And I think, and I love what you're saying there, because if we layer on, now again, if I'm Gen X and I'm trying to understand maybe why someone from a younger generation is responding one way versus another, that's why I want to understand where are they coming from. If they're coming from and I think I'm going to say this too, one more point. From a Gen X standpoint, I come from the position of trusting first, and then whatever happens might create a distrust. But I trust first. And I think to your point, the younger generations are coming from a point of not trusting first. Now we have to earn the trust.
Definitely. And I think that's true with millennials and Gen Z,
Mm.
that there's something that has happened, not just in the mortgage industry. I mean, initially when, at this point I've surveyed over 7,000 millennial and Gen Z consumers, and we've looked at this just declining trust. And I thought that some of that was related to the fact that millennials entered adulthood during or right after the financial crisis. So
Mhm.
there's this lack of trust. In fact, one of the stats that was really surprising to me was that 2 in 3 millennials said they didn't think lenders were trustworthy or reliable. And so they're, and I'm like, okay, yeah, they grew up in this world. Gen Z was the product of that. So there's a lack of trust, but we're seeing trust decline across all different kinds of industries, whether it be media, healthcare, technology, education. Like there's just, for a variety of reasons, and I think one of those being the wild amount of information we have access to, there is that immediate lack of trust that exists. And so how do you overcome that? It's going to be always around building trust. Like you aren't, yeah, you're not starting with trust, you're starting with nothing and you're building, and I think that
Mhm.
has to be everyone's part of everyone's strategy when you're thinking about reaching a first-time home buyer or younger generation.
Well, and here and then here comes the data, right? I mean, again, I think when I was a first time home buyer at around I think 28 maybe. Now, as I'm coming into the workforce, the only thing on my mind is when can I buy my first home?
Mm.
And I think in the younger generation now, because we've seen it, right? The data says, hey, 10 years ago, the average first time home buyer age was 33. Last year was 35. This year is 38. That is a massive change in
Yeah.
the data. Data doesn't move like that, especially from such a wide statistical analysis. So do you think that is because of the lack of trust?
I mean, I think it's become so wildly unaffordable to own a home. So like there's just that is number one. The number one, interest rates rose. It priced a lot of people out of the market. Home prices rose at a level that did not, wages didn't even come close to
Yeah.
matching. So that was just that's like where we saw this go. I do think there's a lack of trust. And I will say, I bought a home in when I was, let's see, it was 3 years ago, so like 34-ish. And I'm in Los Angeles, and I did have in my mind that I was not going to be able to buy. So it was just already this in my head, there's no way I will be able to buy a home here. And that prevented me from starting the process because like I had the money, and at that time interest rates were lower, and I there there was just this unknown, this like barrier in my head. So I do think there's a lot of people that probably could buy with the help of down payment assistance programs or co-buying, or a lot of innovative methods I think that are out there, or they could, but they think that they can't because of this
Mhm.
existing challenge.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, look what's happening. Let's just start at 2019. We have this sort of relative, barometer of rates, and then obviously, the COVID years, rates drop significantly, values go up significantly. Now rates go up, matching the value, right? And you're right, because as I talk to again, these guys I mentor, and as I talk to the younger generation, there is a belief system that we can't buy a home. There's a
Hmm.
belief system that we can't afford a home. And you're right. It's not coming from lack of trust. It's coming from no, look, it's just not affordable at this stage in our lives.
Yeah. Where I do think the lack of trust comes in though is that there's like this lack of like feeling that I can't access home ownership. And then where do I go from there? I don't
Yeah.
trust the information that's online, and I don't trust, like I don't have somebody to talk to. So I think that there's that's then the second level of that barrier. Even if they could, they're not having a conversation with someone because they don't have that trust.
Yeah, sure. Right. And obviously I think most everybody on here, and I recognize some names, we all come from the mortgage, side of the business, or we're mortgage adjacent, if we have certainly real estate and other, people that serve this. And so here we are, we have the generations, and look, affordability doesn't matter where the generation's at. Affordability is just an issue, and or maybe, as I hear is reworded, it's home obtainability. The other stat on here, which I think is really fascinating, is that the move up buyer age has gone from the average age of 58 to 61. So that's also fascinating to me. I would have guessed that would have been a younger age. So not only are the first time home buyers buying later, but the move up buyers are later in life as well.
Well, do you think that has to do with the fact that they want to hold on to their interest rate? And so they
Well, I think yes, right now for
don't.
sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Son, if you can do a stat check on what that average for the move up buyer average age was. Again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because I'd like to see how that dynamic has changed as well. So obviously, affordability comes into play. So then,
Yeah,
what do
because
we
I would
do?
think, well, I'm never gonna move out of here because I got a good interest rate. Unfortunately, I have a stupid arm on my because I had to buy into it. I bought into a tenancy in common. And but yeah, if I'd had like a 30-year fixed or something, I would be like, well, I'm never leaving,
Yeah,
it's a good situation. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So okay, so let's pivot towards, thinking about, okay, so we've talking a little bit about just sort of understanding the generations, right? I mean, here we are, Xers, I come in with trust first, down through millennial and Zers coming in with lack of trust first. Okay. We are living a world of constant information, constant noise, too much. We're all trying to adapt to it. We're on social media. We're constantly pumping with education. We have to try to figure out how to also not be white noise, with this.
Mhm.
Um, we have probably different sales approaches when we are talking to someone who's a Gen Z versus a Gen X. Now, so you're executive director of First Home IQ. Why don't if every, I don't know, I'm assuming everybody in the audience knows and loves what First Home IQ is, but I know some of you don't know what it is. So, Kristin, why don't you talk a little bit about First Home IQ, if you would?
Yeah, great. Well, we're fairly new, about a year and a half now, but we are a nonprofit that focuses on bringing financial literacy and homeownership education, resources, and inspiration to the next generation. So we do that in part by providing free education resources to teachers, and we focus on Gen Z a lot, but consumers and homebuyers. And then we also have an ambassador program where loan officers and mortgage and housing professionals participate in a program, and we support them with education resources to reach first-time home buyers. So it's kind of perfect marriage. The funding from the ambassador program supports the free resources, and then we help ambassadors reach first-time home buyers.
And so, okay, and then why did you and Dave put together First Home IQ? Like, what were you guys identifying as the reason, and maybe partially addressing what is that gap? Why is the first time home buyer age going up? How do we help solve this gap?
Well, do you mind if I share a couple slides?
Please.
Okay, great. Because this will, well, first of all, I'll share my background. I started out my career as a social worker, and I worked a lot with homeless youth and immigrant communities, a lot of underserved areas. And I started realizing the power of education. Like, yes, there were obviously very real barriers there that needed support and resources, but education made a huge difference. And so I saw people coming to me telling me about getting involved in predatory lending practices and, things like that that like could have been different if they'd understood some basic financial principles. And then I saw things change when I started doing presentations and helping people understand financial things. But we don't get that education naturally. I mean, we don't get it in school, and this is where, yeah, at First Home IQ, we've talked about like, where does the next generation learn about money? When they're getting their first job, they should have a basic understanding of what budgeting, saving, and investing looks like. But we haven't had any education in schools typically around financial literacy. By the time you're 18, you're getting credit card offers, student loan debt offers. This is where I worked with so many people that got into huge amounts of debt, which I'm sure all of you on the call have had this experience as well, just because they didn't understand what was happening. You should know how your credit score works. You should know how debt management works. And then by the time you're 21, you're entering adulthood, graduating college maybe, or starting your careers, still haven't received any kind of financial literacy education. But at this point, we would hope, and our mission with First Home IQ is at this point, we're learning about at least some basic homeownership strategies like co-buying or house hacking and things like that. By the time you're 35, now 38, the average age of buying your first home, we've made a bunch of mistakes already. And this is the other major money milestone that as an organization we focus on, is like, what are the steps to buying your first home, and trying to provide people with trustworthy information that helps guide them through that process. So as I mentioned, I've surveyed a bunch of millennials and Gen Zs at this point. We've done annual reports since 2020, and over 7,000 millennial and Gen Z. And there's been some common themes that have come up. One of those is around education, but one is what we've been talking about around accessibility, that the next generation doesn't feel homeownership is within reach. This was from January of this year, and I'll be curious to see how that comes about in January of this next year. Um, Knowledge, there's a lack of confidence around their home buying knowledge that prevents them from buying a home. In fact, we saw that 30% or 35% of millennial and Gen Z said that their lack of knowledge was a current barrier to buying a home. So, that's one of the big areas. And then distrust is the other one that we've been talking about. So they're not feeling confident in their own knowledge. They're also not feeling confident in the market or that it's accessible to them. And then they're not even able to have a conversation with somebody. So, this is our mission around First Home IQ, is to reverse those trends, to deliver that homeownership education, inspiration, and resources. And so we look at those money milestones, and we've created content, online online courses, presentation materials, quiz content, and part of that mission is to provide empower ambassadors to go into their communities with that education to bring financial literacy and homebuyer education, with the knowledge that it's not just a nonprofit initiative. Like, yes, partnering with a nonprofit builds trust. It provides that third party, support, but also there are 82 million millennials and Gen Z who are not yet homeowners. And there is a huge opportunity there to build trust, to provide education, and become known in that community as someone who provides those resources. So, there's a lot of, I think, even hesitation to go into those markets. But I was just talking with a Gen Zer who said she didn't care how old someone was. She didn't care, she wanted to have someone that she felt like she could trust to provide some information. So I think there's a big opportunity with a noisy world to be someone who's kind of a bright light in what feels like a dark space.
All right. So I mean, there's a ton of great information, and I want to maybe highlight and maybe energize a couple points in here, right, for everybody to listen. So, we sort of opened up this conversation, and really what we're talking about is the gap, right? There's a gap in our younger generations, millennials and Gen Zs. There's a trust gap. There's an education gap. And look, we can't rely on our school systems, and I wish they did teach more of this stuff, but it's up to us as parents. It's up to us as parents, right? So we have an education gap in real world application, let's just say. So we have a couple of gaps here: trust, education. We have a lot of noise. Okay. That's creating confusion. It's adding to distrust. We have I think a big increase, certainly. And when we talk about the shift in mortgage, we're going to see a much bigger increase. We're already seeing it with call centers, servicers, and the like. So what are our opportunities as originators, as a retail force, branch managers, leadership, the mortgage industry? Well, if our gap is trust and our gap is education, building trust and educating, to me, seems like the biggest opportunity to help solve that gap in what you just identified: 82 million Gen Zers and millennials who don't own a home yet. Okay, so just hold on to that one for a second. Then, as we look at, and I don't remember the stat off the top of my head, but as the move up buyers 58 to 61, but of the first time home buyers, there was a big stat in there that the majority of down payment came from a loan, inheritance, something from the parents. Okay. So in terms of home obtainability, let's just say home obtainability, I'm just going to ask questions here. How are we as the industry, how are we educating the younger generation? How are we creating opportunity for the younger generation, i.e. First Home IQ is the supporter of that? What about how are we helping educate parents or those that are helping with down payments? What strategies we can facilitate for that? And by the way, not just at the moment of, I want to buy a home, how do I get down payment? What if we are the strategic educators of the parents and the children ahead of wanting to buy a home, helping create the right savings and the right strategies, so when we're ready to buy a home, now we're in position and we're the ones who are leading that? And again, I'll point back to First Home IQ and the ambassador program and everything that goes around that. And as you know, I'm a big supporter and lover of that because of its ability to help solve these gaps. So so Ryan, I see you're putting, I'm going to read this here in a second, but anybody who's listening, please put in some comments. What are your thoughts here? What are other solutions? What are we thinking here? Right? I mean, And then how do we apply it, right? We've got social media, we've got education at consultation, we've got event strategy, right? How do we apply this, especially as we're thinking about what is 2025 going to look like? How do we want to position ourselves to help address these gaps, to help be part of the solution? So what are your thoughts on some of that, Kristin?
And I'm pumped about what Ryan's talking about. Like, I do, and exactly what you're saying. Like, I think going to the parents and helping the parents educate their kids as well. So there's one, strategies for the parents to help them, build wealth for their kids. And then two, there is like one thing, Tim Brahim was on a mastermind for us just a couple months ago, and he talked about how to put on education classes for your database
Yeah.
so that the parents can invite their kids. And, I think instead of expecting parents to educate their kids or expecting that parents know anything about passing on, supporting their kids and becoming homeowners, like those are two different strategies that can really make a difference that just rely on your database. So I think those are really good ideas.
I'm happy you hit on that because that's exactly where I was leaning towards, right? Which is, what about an event strategy as one of your business pillars, where that event strategy is about educating the parents and the kids, right? In the same room. So we're educating about first-time home buyer. We're educating about how to create strategic savings for down payment, and help and that stuff, right? Down payment assistance, whatever those opportunities are. How are we educating within our market? How are we educating about the opportunities within the market, building wealth? I mean, all the different things that we're all experts in. How do we apply that knowledge into an event strategy? That's a one-to-many strategy.
Okay, I am going to share with you guys this resource. So based off of that idea, we put together a resource that had an email template and a video to kind of get started on that idea of educating your database. And so that it includes this link to this exact thing, where it includes an email copy. Of talking to their kids about this, and then a video that you could create. And I think going from there to set up an event, set up a Zoom call and continue that conversation. But anyway, I'm going to drop this in the chat, and I've made it so that anyone can access this. But that could be a good place to start.
Okay, I love it. And again, I just want to encourage, right? Like, really check out First Home IQ, because you guys are providing not just content, but you're providing strategy. And that, and for those of you that know me, I mean, one of the biggest issues and challenges throughout our careers that creates all this inconsistency, the start, stop, start, stop, stop, stop. That's what business plans usually fail, is because we have a vision and we jump right to action, but we're missing strategy. We're missing strategy. Hey, I have a vision. I want to do more first-time home buyers. Okay, I'm just gonna throw a bunch of videos up there, but what's the strategy? Are we thinking about the parents? Are we thinking about how we create down payment? Are we thinking about, well, maybe they're not coming with trust first. So how do I build trust first? Are we thinking about how we position ourselves to be known and seen as an ambassador who is helping trying to solve this gap, right? So I want to encourage, really check out First Home IQ, because the other thing is, the other ambassadors that are part of this are the industry's best and brightest. And so there's so much community that'll develop from this.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, focusing on where you can like those points around building wealth and using strategic tax and wealth techniques, like those kinds of ideas where I was just talking to a friend yesterday who said her parents have like a lot of money saved up to support her with a down payment, but they weren't comfortable with moving forward with that yet. And I was like, do they know what's happening there? Like, there's lost wealth opportunities by waiting, and they don't know, but you could be out there sharing those kinds of strategies. So
Yeah, and maybe, especially if you're a homeowner, or, you think about the parents who are homeowners, is there an assumption that they do know?
right.
And because I was sort of thinking, well, why don't you know this? But you're right, like, let's not assume. And of course, there's so many powerful tools, Mortgage Coach and other things that to help illustrate, right, building wealth over time. And so now we're having strategic conversations. We're not just having transactional conversations. And that's, again, I'm just going to reiterate, and who I work with and who I see out there that are succeeding on purpose, who are making their markets, not just waiting for the market to make something happen, it's because they're implementing this version of a strategy or a strategy in general. So I'm just highlighting that this is something. Not everybody has to do this. But if you want to lean into this, lean in strategically.
Yeah. And I think the more that you can leverage the relationships that you have, I mean, yeah, one direction is educating the parents, and then the other being like they're the kids are going to listen to their parents in a lot of ways. I mean, most kids are saying they want to, you know, they would at least listen to a resource from their parents. And so by providing that kind of education, some kind of series, or even an email that you're forwarding on to the, to have the parents share with their kids, that's something that can make a real difference.
Okay, so we're just over the halfway mark. So everybody who's still here, please put in the chat, are you trying to help solve this gap? Are you involved with first-time home buyers? What are things that you guys are doing? What are some solutions that you see? Put in a little chat, ask any questions of Kristin or myself. I'd love to be able to get a little bit more from the audience on, because at the street level, when we're working with, the younger generation, what are the pushbacks? Is there an immediate, it's just not obtainable, or is there something else? Right. And so if you have any commentary, please put it in here. So, all right. So with that being said, again, how do we reach the first time home buyer? How do we get in front of more, in that, call it, and I don't know, maybe 25 is, I don't know. Well, again, do we want to get in front of them so we can start educating now? Maybe they're not buying at 25, but if we can create an education path, I mean, what are people doing to get in front of people sooner and create more opportunities ahead of the moment of transaction?
Yeah, I think people could buy younger. I mean, it's just people don't know the strategies that exist, the house hacking, buying with a group of friends or another person, and what that could look like. We need to think outside the box, and also obviously looking at down payment assistance. Down payment resource is a really great website for supporting people in doing that, both loan officers and consumers. And looking at how do we help that happen at a younger age. And even if they are not quite ready to buy, they are going to be building trust with you, where they will refer you to other people that they know and trust.
Well, okay, so there we go, right there, right? When we start becoming, no, I used to say, like, early in my career, I was an AE on the mortgage side. I worked for a company called First Franklin, and this is the early mid 2000s, and I knew I was successful because I would always get the first call, even to the point of, hey, Craig, I know you can't do the loan, but you're so good at helping me structure it. Who do you think can do this? So I knew as long as I was getting the first call, even if I can't do it. So to the point of, if we're being seen as that strategic advisor, if we're being seen as that person who is able to help educate the parents and the children, does that then create more referral opportunities, separating us from the transaction, right? And so I just want to illustrate that. All right, so what's T Rose saying here? Depending on marketplace, on the topic of affordability, we are seeing more and more discussions around property improvements. That's right, ADUs, multiple generation households. Yeah, and that's fascinating. There has definitely been a huge rise in ADUs, right? So you were saying also, I don't think I've even heard this term before, house hacking.
Mm,
Do you want to
yeah.
expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's aligned with the idea of buying with another person or a group, but the idea that you could account for the rent from other tenants in the house that you buy, and then you stay there for a year and you can move out and buy another property. That's kind of what people refer to as house hacking, but it could also mean just like co-buying, or the ability to come in through alternative methods of buying a home outside of just you yourself buying. So, yeah.
Are you seeing people market that strategy?
Yeah, I am. They are typically younger loan officers, and but yeah, I've seen a few people. It's becoming more popular, I think, of a term with younger people, because they know it's a way, like Gen Zers want to build wealth. They want to
Yeah.
have financial stability, and they see the opportunity with homeownership. But by looking at it from a different lens, that's a way to open that door.
Well, and of course my daughter here, she'd be super embarrassed, right? But like speaking in their language, right? So if the Gen Z, if they're thinking about house hacking, that means something to them. Well, let's use that language. Of course, for my daughter who's 14, I'm talking about, Slay Queen and, who's Katrina, you're on here. We're always joking around Gen Z language and, so, we got to make this, high key and, high key investment into the, support of, the Gen Z. And, we'll be, what else can I say? Can I say like Sigma, right? She always talks about Sigma and some other things. Yeah. So, but again, right, like house hacking, if that is a term that they're recognizing. And again, I'm old now, like I'm Gen X, I'm old. I don't even know that, but I want to start, and I want to start marketing that way because again, I'm already just making assumptions that you would know that you can do that. And let's not make those assumptions. Let's look for these marketing opportunities, these event opportunities, these education opportunities that we're providing solutions. So, is that an out of box thing, or that's really not out of the box? We're just labeling it, right? And so I pick up on those things as great little Easter eggs, in our market. What else are you hearing from the ambassadors as strategies and other areas that they're doing?
Let's see. One, I mean, we talked about the personalization of advice. I think, we have a quiz, the First Home IQ quiz that you can access at firsthomeiq.com/getmyscore, but it's a way to measure your understanding of buying your first home. And you get the answers at the end and reasons why and things like that. And we've had a lot of ambassadors use that at the beginning of presenting, like doing a workshop. So it's a good way to open the door to having conversation, or at the beginning of a consultation. And our ambassadors have their own unique version of that, and then they get emailed the name, email, and results of people that take the quiz. But everyone can use this for free by just using the Get My Score version of that. And but it's a good way, because the one of the issues is that people don't know what questions to ask. And so there's just like a language barrier or even, again, that knowledge barrier. But if people have some questions as they go through the quiz, then they are like, oh yeah, I've heard about this. Can you tell me more about that? And it opens the door to conversation. So I would say like that's a good resource out there. And then also, of course, like looking for unique partnerships,
Mm,
like I had an ambassador who did an event at her local gym,
mm.
and it was like partnering with a community leader that's already got the audience. And the gym owner wanted to have more education. They called it health is wealth. And it's just looking for those opportunities that maybe again are a little outside of the box.
Well, and again, this feeds right into, look, our markets have just they've been pretty awful the last couple of years, right? And we're looking ahead, and what is 2025 going to look like? And I want to take the approach of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what our markets are looking like. We have to make our market in this type of setting, right? So these are all really golden nuggets about trying to make a market here. Events, education, positioning yourself, being recognized, personal brand, right? The quiz. If we start pushing that out, and by the way, can you put that, or you put the link in there? Okay, sorry, I see that now. Yeah. So there's the quiz, right? Is it going to help create conversations? Can we have unique partnerships? Well, who else can you align with in this? If my purpose right now is to help solve the generation gap, to help bring home obtainability to the younger generation and before they turn 38, for all the greatness in the world, to build wealth and real estate, to create opportunity. Here's now some areas that we're recognizing as strategies to be able to do that. Can we shift the mindset? Can we shift from I can't to yet? And by the way, yet is one of the most powerful words in the English language. It is the bridge between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. I can't buy a home yet. Be the yet person. And if we can educate parents and children, think about the value, the loyalty, the retention, the growth, the referrals that you can build within your network. It's not going to happen overnight. but as part of your strategic, right, plan, your personal brand. And then that's woven into your marketing. Again, we're talking about event strategy, consultation strategy. What other things feed that to support you being that person? First time home IQ, mortgage coach, MBS Highway, right? Bomb, educate through video. Um, anyway, so I'm going off on my rabbit hole because I love this subject because again, one, we're solving something, but two, externally, but two, like internally, for everybody who's struggling, right? Trying to find their niche, trying to find their foothold in this market, right? This is one of those ways to hopefully help reignite those that are looking for that little spark again, you know? So,
Yeah, and you can't do it all. I mean, there's so
yeah.
many different, like if you think about social media, there's so much that you could do there on its own. You could do so much with just events on their own and partnerships and all these things, but choose one area, take one step and just, really drill into that. I'll share a couple other, slides. I talked about the quiz, which by the way, the average score is 57%. Just, and this is a basic quiz, but just, really understanding or getting that education out there. I said getting creative around the partnerships. This is the person that did this with the gym, the Health is Wealth event. But then if you want to go on the online strategy side, look at creating educational video content. This is almost as high as friends and family for where next gen goes for personal finance information. So this is at the very top of the list. Like when people are looking for education, they want to see video content. YouTube is at the top of the list on where they go on social media to learn about buying a home. No surprise there, but it is its own strategy. And I think there's a lot of, it will take time like anything else, but there's a lot of benefit to doing that.
I'm
So
actually surprised to see Facebook is high up in that rank
I
right
was
here.
so surprised too. I was like, well, guess I got to put it there.
My daughter, when I was
Facebook.
starting to get my social media going a couple of years ago, my daughter would just make fun of me for being, again, my daughter. She's like, "Dad, what are you doing on Facebook? That's for dinosaurs." And I had to remind her, right? But me and my client base, we're the dinosaurs that I'm trying to market to. So I'm surprised that to see that on there, especially from a younger generation standpoint.
Yeah, it was way lower. I can't pull it up in time, but between Gen Z and millennials, so that number is, the average between millennials and Gen Z. So
Yeah,
Gen Z,
yeah,
I think Facebook was at the bottom, but it still made the top
yeah.
list. So yeah.
Well, and look, the moral of the story here is go to where your audience is at.
Hmm.
Right. And the other thing, and again, right, for anyone who's executing on social media, I see videos all the time, for example, on LinkedIn. But is your first time home buyer on LinkedIn, or are they on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, et cetera? Right. And so we got to make sure that when we are producing marketing content, we're going to where our audience is at.
Yeah. This is
There
the
you go.
difference between millennials and Gen Z. But yeah, it's still 32% of Gen Z
Yeah.
went to Facebook. Again, this was almost a year ago, so we'll see where it lands here in
It
a
knows
couple.
how LinkedIn's not even on here, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, and again, just encouraging everyone peel the onion back, try to get in front of it. From like we were talking about, like just starting from where they're coming from versus where we came from, and the more that we can understand that and start understanding their desired outcomes, speaking their language, right? We can get that. We can start building trust, solving that education gap.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Chris, I know you got to run here as we approach the top of the hour in a few more minutes, but is there any other thoughts that come to mind? Anything else that you're thinking of that you'd like to, help our audience with?
One more thing I'd mention is just like speaking from the heart. This is an example. I'm happy to share this deck with people too, but this was an example of one of our ambassadors, Josh Metal, did a quick video about how financial literacy isn't taught in schools and what that meant to him. And whatever it means to you to be in the business, to be educating, the problem that fires you up around financial literacy, talk about that, create a short video about it, tag First Home IQ, and we'll share it too. And I think, but people are attracted to other people that they feel like are really living in their passion. And so that's a really great strategy that I don't think is going to take as much time as you would, expect something like that. Like, just speak from the heart about it. But the other last words things I wanted to mention is just, again, at First Home IQ, if you are interested in being involved, we are providing free resources to educators and classrooms, and parents and families and things like that. We've created a lot of great media content. If you are interested in being an ambassador, you can go to firsthomeIQ.com/ambassador. Or if you're just interested in supporting this from a financial level, we are trying to raise funds to be able to go into more classrooms next year and reach more students. We want to improve our education resources. So you can come in here, sponsor a student for $100, and would just love to have your support if you are, thinking about end of year giving or anything like that.
Awesome. And is the best way to reach you just going through First Home IQ?
Yeah, you can email me, Kristin at firsthomeIQ.com, or you can go through the website or find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, okay, cool. I love it. Kristin, I know you got to jump. Everybody got 2 more minutes of a message to give everybody, but Kristin, thank you so much. I
Thank
love
you
the
so much.
conversation. Love to
Thanks for
continue the
having
conversation, and I love wearing my beanies. So any opportunity to,
me. Yes.
address my younger generation friends, I'm here for it. So
Thanks so much. Bye.
awesome. Thank you. Sonia, you want to throw up the slides? I know you want me to touch on. So everyone just hang on. So join us next week. So Dawn, Gino, myself, and Sasha, we're going to be on next week, and we're going to be talking, look, let's recap 2024. Where the hell have we been and how did we get here? We're going to talk about also where are we going? What is this shift in mortgage? And again, it's finding opportunities, it's finding those Easter eggs, and what is going on in this market. And of course, Momentum Builder, or Sales Mastery powered by Momentum Builder, and what we are growing and building, as a company here. It's super exciting. We got a badass event coming up and so much more. So we'll touch on that. But Sonia, did I hit everything? Did I move fast? We got a QR code here. Join that. Grab tickets. Early bird specials. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Christmas.